Happy Friday, Baylor College of Medicine and friends of Baylor. Well, thank you all for all your notes last week for our 100th episode. God knows how long I'm going to be able to do this. But let's talk about international news. First of all, Austria is all set to lift all of its COVID restrictions in the next week or so, and Germany also announced that they're going to end COVID restrictions by the end of March. But here's my favorite. Boris Johnson is at it again. Now, I can't even paraphrase, so I'm just going to quote him. Here's the quote from Boris. Whilst the pandemic is not over, we have now passed the peak of the Omicron wave. We need to live with the coronavirus. So I figured out, let me translate for all of those who don't speak Boris Johnson. What he really meant to say in the words of Wayne's World, party on, Garth! Party on, Wayne! Because what better way to distract from all the criticism he's getting that he was partying the whole time while he had lockdowns in England. So, good try, but we see it for what it is. The other thing that I want to point out is the UK, if you look at their confirmed cases, they are coming down, but they are just barely below their peak, and they're way above their hospitalizations. The United States, we're below our peak, but we're also below the number of hospitalizations. And if you think that hospitalizations usually follow cases by 2 weeks, once again, they are stopping their restrictions too soon. And so they're going to have an increase in hospitalizations yet, and it's a big mistake. But again, I think it was a political issue. He wants to distract from his own political problems about his parties. Well, let's keep on talking about the international scene in COVID pandemic. Look at this. China, it's done very well, but there's this one little dot. It's really amazing. Hong Kong. So Hong Kong did very, very well for the last couple of years, using the usual social distancing and fairly aggressive contact tracing and testing. They also had the longest quarantine period for anyone traveling to Hong Kong. You had to stay in a hotel for 3 weeks. But Omicron finally got there, and they're having a huge outbreak, 4,000 to 5,000 cases a day. Their death rate is going up. Hospitals are beyond capacity. So China is now pressuring Hong Kong to get it under control. So what are they going to do? There's 7 million people. They're going to test them 3 times and make sure they're all negative. And Hong Kong really is spiking compared to the region. Thailand and Vietnam also had big spikes, but Vietnam really instituted very aggressive contact tracing and isolation, and they're coming down now. So Vietnam's got it under control. Well, what's the most in the news? Let's talk about Russia. Russia right now is the hot spot in the world. They are totally out of control in many ways, but the virus is out of control. And, it's very interesting when you think about the politics. The people of Russia are not happy about the way Putin has handled the pandemic. They're not happy with their Sputnik V for victory over the pandemic vaccine. They're the most reluctant as a country to get vaccinated because they don't trust the government. And their vaccine isn't that good. So Sputnik V wasn't all that great. So what better thing to do? Let's have an incursion so we can ignore that. So I'm not sure what part of the poor handling of the pandemic is playing in it, but it's been pretty bad. If you think about what's the best way to handle a pandemic, having military incursions is not the right way to do it. If you recall the Spanish outbreak, it started really in the U.S. at Camp Funston and Fort Riley in Kansas in World War I. Everybody's barracked, incredible amount of spread of the virus. And then we sent them all out into the European theater where they spread it all over the place. So not only do we have the political issues about what's going on in Russia and Ukraine, but there's going to be a big problem with managing the pandemic. There's going to be outbreaks. I don't know how you control in a military action, how you control the virus. But, not to be outdone, Walmart, Tyson Foods, and Walt Disney and Disneyland became the latest businesses to loosen their mask requirements. And there are 2 outdoor music festivals, the Coachella and Stagecoach. They're not going to require attendees to be mask vaccinated or tested for the coronavirus. That's progressive thinking. And Massachusetts eased their mask guidelines, and LA has removed their mask mandates for schools except for mega events. I'm not sure what a mega event is, but a mega event is they're going to still have the requirements for mega events. Now, the best news, though, is we're really doing very well. We're very, very optimistic. If you look at this is the heat map for cases. This is January, February 14th, and February 22nd. Things are really cooling off. And even though we're only at 65% vaccinated, the case numbers are really dropping dramatically, which is great. I mean, I'm really optimistic we're going to come to the end of this in the spring. At least we're going to have a huge lull. I don't know what's going to happen in the fall, but that depends how long our immunity lasts as a country. I did think it'd be fun to go back and look at the Institute for Health Metrics and Evaluation and see their projections, and look what their projections are. It'd be virtually gone by hopefully, early April. So things are really picking up. I mean, I'm very happy about what's going on. CDC has begun to publish wastewater data. We were way ahead of them, of course. We started doing that in Houston. But the rest of the country started also doing some wastewater analysis. And these are the various places that the CDC looks at. And blue dots means the wastewater numbers are falling. And they're falling in most places. The only places that still have an increasing burden of virus are actually in Illinois and Wisconsin. So, it really looks like things are really improving. In Harris County, our wastewater numbers are down by almost 87%. So we're really doing fantastically well. And it's a good thing. It's a very good thing because, the 3 variants of Omicron are actually, the 2 additional variants of Omicron are more infectious than the original one. And they're beginning to emerge. You can see the recombinant Omicron and the BA2 Omicron, both are beginning to take a certain percentage of the cases. The purple is Omicron 1, the pink is Omicron 2, and the purple is the recombinant. And you can see they're expanding, but the susceptible pool of individuals is shrinking. So they're more infectious, but fewer and fewer people are susceptible because so many people have either been vaccinated or caught Omicron and are now resistant. And so Texas is looking really quite good, with the exception of Dimmitt County. I don't know. I love them. I just love them. But they're still having a lot of 110 per 100,000. In Harris County in Houston, we're down to almost 25 per 100,000. Remember, being under 10 per 100,000 is low risk. So we're almost to a low risk. We're moderate risk now, but we're getting towards low risk. And in the Texas Medical Center, we continue to drop. We're down to 1,700 cases per day. That's still nowhere near where we want to be. We want to be around 200. But you can see it's beginning to taper off. Now, the interesting thing always is the curve up is steeper than the curve down. And so we are having a little bit of a tail coming down. And if you look at hospitalizations, once again, we're dropping, but not as fast as we'd like. We went from 200 to 180. So there was one really good paper this week that I think was very insightful and gives me a lot of hope for what's going on. This was out of the Nussenzweig lab in Rockefeller. It was published in bioRxiv, which is a preprint, so it hasn't been peer-reviewed, but this is an outstanding immunology group. And what they wanted to address was, we know that the Omicron variant has been infecting many people who've been vaccinated and also people who had convalesced from the Delta variant. And yet, not many people are getting really seriously ill. So they really wanted to look at that issue. And you got to remember that the vaccine we have was from the original strain isolated from Wuhan, which was called Wuhan Hu1. So, all these mutations that have happened since, we're still getting vaccinated to the very, very original vaccine. And the thing about, if you look at people who are vaccinated or who've gotten infected before, the level of neutralizing antibodies against Omicron are actually quite low. And the third mRNA vaccine, the booster, does induce some anti-Omicron activity, but very, low, like 10 to 20-fold lower than it would against the other variants. So, it doesn't seem like it protects that much. And yet, despite that, if you get a booster, you're really protected very much against serious disease. So what they want to do is look at, what was happening with those memory B cells. So remember, when you're infected, a certain number of B cells go to a germinal center and they sit there and they know the peptides that they've created immunoglobulins to, and they sit there ready to go. So if you're infected, they're ready to fire out another round of cells that produce immunoglobulins. So what happened with the third dose is it caused a new set of memory B cells to be produced. So you're doing pretty well, everything's good, and you get a third vaccine, and there's another set of memory B cells. And the difference between the first round of vaccinations and this third round is that the cells that are produced in this round with the booster actually produced immunoglobulins that recognize Omicron, even though there's no Omicron there. So what is the reason for that? Well, it turns out that they are producing antibodies to a very specific domain of the Omicron spike protein, which all of them share, which is the receptor binding domain. That piece of the spike protein that must bind to the receptor to get into the cell. And because of that, it strongly suggests that that third dose is inducing immunity that will maybe be against many different variants and even against many different coronaviruses. So this was really exciting data that, because you keep getting vaccinated, it is producing very specific antibodies to the binding domain. And that may then supersede any of the other variations. So really exciting paper. We'll see how it does in review, but very, very important paper. I think explains why, despite the fact we keep vaccinating against the same spike protein that's not even Omicron, we're getting this huge benefit from mortality and serious illness. Remember, with a booster, it's almost a 100-fold reduction in mortality risk and a 20-fold reduction in severe illness. So anyway, there's evidence also that the Omicron is getting less and less virulent. So there's an interesting paper published in the Times Financial News that looked at the evolution of Omicron and how it's getting less and less infection. And what they looked was at the infection fatality rate, in other words, how many people get infected and what's the fatality rate. And over time, it drops pretty dramatically. And it's related to the increase in the number of people who are actually immune or resistant to the virus. And the immunity is based on those who've actually gotten infected and those who've gotten antibodies from being vaccinated. And again, what you see in general is over time, this virus has become less and less virulent and is causing less and less mortality. Contrast to that, what's going on in the pediatric population, more and more hospitalizations in the pediatric population. And this blue line is in particular those between 0 and 4 who have not been vaccinated. And so in many ways, it's beginning to look more and more like a traditional respiratory virus where the very old get problems and the very young get problems. And so it's interesting to see the evolution of the virus as we become more and more immune as a population. So really good, couple of good studies this week giving us some insights into what's going on. So I want to end this week with a couple of shout outs. First, I want to give a giant shout out to my old high school, Western Missouri Academy, that invited me to return to Cleveland, Ohio. I never wanted to go back to Cleveland, but to Hudson, Ohio, which was very beautiful. I got to meet all the students and the faculty. It was really a lot of fun for me. And I also want to send a lot of thanks to the people who send in a bunch of notes on our 100th episode. Two biggest issues were, where's my sister? You will never see. And also a blooper reel. Where's the blooper reel? So, and that was my sister's big thing. Where's the blooper reel? So I had to explain to her. Now, I'm not sure if she's going to believe this, but if you recall, my sister is a film professor. And I had to come up with an explanation why we don't have a blooper reel. So the one I came up with is Billy, our producer and director, is very influenced by Hitchcock. And the way Hitchcock directs is there's a single frame, there's a single camera, and it's one take. And that's why we don't have a blooper reel. So it's really all because we're so influenced by Alfred Hitchcock. If you believe that, Janet, that'll be great. Anyway, good to see you. I can't wait to see you next week.
Cut. PK, I need more emotion, baby. I need you. You're getting attacked by birds. Lily, you're doing a great job. You're doing a great job, sweetheart. Just keep doing what you're doing. Makeup.
That's okay, we'll go get
Can we get some makeup for Lily?
Bye. Okay. Quiet on the set.
Action. More birds!